Yeah. You're good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are live now. So, 6, we are calling this meeting to order at 9:08. My name is Gracie Wu, I'm the vice chair. And we don't have quorum right now, so we're going to jump right into informational items instead. That would be agenda item number 7, the provider presentation. That's good. Much.
Yeah, this is Gordon Darm. Gordon Darm with Keenan. I'd like to introduce Anthem Blue Cross. We have, to the right, we have Nicole Harbor, our the city's manager for Anthem, and Anthem will be going over some 2024 utilization data, but more importantly, some highlights, things that the committee should be aware of for 2025 trends. So I'll turn the time over to Nicole, and she can introduce herself and the rest of it.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Excited to have the opportunity to present to you on the Anthem utilization for this year. As Gordon mentioned, my name is Nicole Harbor. I'm the Anthem account executive, and today I have with me Gilbert Soto, who's our analytics consultant, and Dr. Taya Gills, who is our medical director.
Hi.
Good morning. So for today's presentation, we were given about 20 minutes to review both medical and pharmacy. So we'll start off with medical. And you'll see here on this slide about your review, we're covering the time period of December 2023 through November 2024. And we'll reference prior periods for that same time frame. The high cost claimant cycle or the threshold that we're looking at is 250,000. So any claimants with 250,000 or more in claims. And then in reference to benchmark, we'll include our California public sector. This is our first time actually introducing this benchmark, so I thought it was a perfect fit for the city of LA. And I will hand it over to Gilbert to get into the review.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So looking at this executive summary slide here, this is really more of an introduction to the data that we'll be doing a deeper dive on. So just wanted to highlight some of the things that are jumping out in your data. So when we look at your medical trend, we are seeing your per member per month cost going up by 11%. That is higher than our benchmark, which is at 7.4%. When we look at your total top conditions, the thing that jumped out were that cancer and behavioral health have been the top 2 conditions by spend this year and last year. And something that's notable is that the percent of spend for cancer has gone up from 11% up to 14%. And we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive as to what's driving cancer claims. And then over to the far right, some things I just wanted to point out here is when we look at your total membership, we're seeing that 34% of your members have a chronic condition. I will say that that's better than our benchmark. We're seeing our benchmark has a higher percentage of members with chronic conditions. And when we look at your behavioral health claims, you're hovering around 14%, which is slightly below benchmark at 15%. And then one last thing I wanted to point out on this slide is some positive news is when we look at your primary care visits and your adult wellness visits, we are seeing that those are above our benchmark. So people are getting their wellness, they are seeing the doctor, which is good news. So we always want to see those numbers kind of trending up year over year. With that, we will do a deeper dive into the financials on the next slide. So here, just highlighting 3 things that are impacting your medical trend. So overall, as we had stated, 11% increase in your medical per member per month cost. That's being driven by 2 factors. We're seeing an increase in your membership by 1%. So total membership of around 18,500 members. and your paid amount increasing by 12%. So we're seeing a total spend of about 66 million. So a little bit more people costing a little bit more than they did last year. And then focusing on this middle section here, where we're looking at your high cost claims, your per member per month cost for high cost claims increased by about 16%. We're seeing that your average cost for high cost claims, these are claims greater than 250, is about $538,000. I will note in the deck, we do have our benchmark numbers, and we're seeing that's higher. Our benchmark is showing a high cost claim average of about 550,000. And then just looking at percentage of members with high cost claims, you have 0.2% of members, or roughly 42 members with claims greater than 250, driving about 20% of your total spend. And then down below, this last section here is we're looking at place of service where people are seeking care. And we see that the inpatient setting has increased by about 19%. Looking at your average cost of admission, it's hovering around $23,000. We are seeing more people being admitted to the hospital on a per thousand basis. And the one thing that jumped out is looking at the top condition within inpatient setting. Circulatory accounted for 20% of total cost. And when we looked at the data, we did see that there was an increase in the number of claims over 100,000 with members with circulatory condition, from 6 last year up to 13 this year. So that's helping to see that drive that we're seeing there in the inpatient setting. Any questions? I'll pause there before we get into the high cost claims.
I have one question on the previous slide, on slide 3. The top right percentages, chronic conditions and behavioral health. Is there any overlap between those percentages, or are those looking at not with comorbidity, or how does comorbidity work into those numbers?
So we're looking at 2 different sets of members, so they could fall in both. So within the chronic, those would be members with like cancer, hypertension, depression would fall into there. And then just behavioral health would be solely just related to anything behavioral health related. So members could fall in both. If, let's say, they had depression,
Right.
it would be in the percentage of chronic.
Counted on both.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
On the next slide here, looking at high cost claims, as we had stated, just 0.2% of members driving about 20% of spend. In the middle here, looking at range, what jumps out is looking at the number of members with high cost claims increasing from 500,000 to just under 1 million, went up from 9 to 11, and claims from 250 to just under 500,000, jumping from 25 up to 29. So overall, we're seeing an increase of 36 members with high cost claims, up to 42 in the current period. And then down below, I'll hand it off to Dr. Gills. One thing I do want to note is that one member that's in bold, the majority of their cost is driven by pharmacy and not medical. So just wanted to point that out if you're wondering why that one was bold and the rest were not.
Can I ask a question before you move on about that? And you may have explained this in the previous slide, but the difference, the ratio of the high cost claims having gone up significantly, is that based on pharmacy in general, or as opposed to them getting and having additional illness that requires more medical, or is it based on pharmacy prices going up?
So this slide here is the only slide that I have that's both medical and pharmacy. We'll have the pharmacy folks kind of speak to higher cost in drugs, but I can just say within the top 10, we are seeing that one of your members is mostly just pharmacy.
And I will say that top high cost claimant has been consistent year over year with their dollars. And I know Dr. Jones will speak to a little bit of that in a second.
Yes, and so I've been following this patient long term now. So I don't know if you're familiar with the patient, but they have severe combined immunodeficiency, and most of the cost is driven by the drug Rigcovy. And they also take IVIG. And this has been longstanding. The member also is being evaluated for a double lung transplant at UP, University of Pennsylvania, I believe. And they have not had a double lung transplant yet, but that looks like it'll be anticipated. This member was referred from UCLA to UPMC. So this is a long-standing member with high cost and likely will continue to be high cost. Of note from the high cost claimants, one member has termed and 3 have expired. The high cost claimant number 3 has expired. Let me just go there. With total inpatient days, and they have musculoskeletal as the high claim with back surgery. It's just a complicated hospital course from that surgery. And also claimant 6 has expired from sepsis, and claimant member, I'm sorry, 7 and 10 have expired from cancer. All of these cases have mostly cancer have driven the cost for the last 3 high cost claimants. Do you have any questions? I know we only have allotted, a certain amount of time, so I really didn't want to go into all of the members with great detail, but if you have any questions.
One thing I will call out is all of these high cost claimants are actively managed to make sure that they're receiving the appropriate care. And even for the top high cost claimant, although we see them year after year, we are actively looking at them. Even our team here, talking in person, is actively looking to make sure that they are receiving their medications from the right the most efficient location. And if there is any support needed from our case management team, that's available as well. We'll move on to the next slide.
Great, thank you. On this slide here, we'll be focusing more on the clinical. So the question here is, what health conditions are impacting the population? As we had mentioned before, cancer and behavioral health were the top 2 by spend. When we look at your cancer per member per month trend, that increased by about 41%. It is ranked your number 1 by total spend, accounting for 14% of total dollars spent. Within the cancer, what's driving these costs is chemotherapy, radiation, breast cancer, and lung cancer. Now, lung cancer did increase from last year. We didn't see that as a high cost claim, but now we're seeing it kind of jumping into the top 3. Looking at compliance rates within cancer, we did see that breast cancer claims or breast cancer screenings were above benchmark. Good news there. And then looking at colon cancer, it was right on par with benchmark. Moving down to behavioral health, this is your number 2 condition by total spend. That increased by 12% on a per member per month basis. Now, when we look at the number of claims, 50% of behavioral health claims came from employees. But then when we look at cost, 50% of costs came from children. 3 of the top conditions by spend within behavioral health is related to depression, autism, and anxiety. And then stepping away from costs and looking at prevalence, this last bullet here focuses on chronic conditions. So we do see that 19% of members had 2 or more chronic conditions. Compared to benchmark, we're seeing 28%. So good news there as far as lower percentage of members with more than 2 chronic conditions. And then looking within the prevalence of chronic conditions, we did see that obesity was the number 1 condition by prevalence. We did see prevalence increase by 9%. And we do want to know, I know pharmacy will be presenting after us, but due to some GLP-1 medications that may be contributing to some of these higher prevalences of obesity that we're seeing here. And then looking by relationship, we see that employees have a higher percentage of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes on a per 1,000 basis.
So since compliance rates are lumped into the 40% on the top for cancer, does that mean all the screenings, all the diagnostics and screenings are part of that 40%?
They would fall under health status, so it would be under like wellness visits and those kind of checkups there.
Do you like us to?
If we can skip this slide here, and we'll just go really quickly on this chronic condition slide here. Here we're just kind of listing all 5 of the chronic conditions by prevalence. So number 1, we do see obesity. It is slightly lower than benchmark, but I think that's the only chronic condition where you do see that where it's closer to benchmark compared to like hypertension. There is a bigger discrepancy there. And then down below, we also listed just lifestyle behaviors. The D stands for directly associated and I stands for indirectly associated. So here's just a really helpful way to kind of see these chronic conditions and some of the lifestyle behaviors that impact it.
For that one, how come there's not an association between obesity, overweight, and stress, anxiety, depression?
We can check to see that, but yeah, these are based on some studies that have been done, but I can double check to see why that one was excluded.
Okay. Yeah, or maybe I'm just not understanding
Yeah, it
the
does seem like
technical term of association, because I know later in the appendix, when you're talking about comorbidities, it is linked. So maybe there's some fine distinction between association and comorbidity that I'm not.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. We do see the comorbidity of stress and obesity play a part, but I'll double check to see why that one didn't have that association.
Okay, thank you.
And then pass it to Nicole.
All right, I'll actually go back one slide. All right, so on this slide, we wanted to highlight for you a few programs that you have in place and also some new programs that are going to be available for 2026. I know Gilbert just covered the chronic conditions. We wanted to highlight our diabetes prevention program. It's something we actually just did a review on for the benefits team and the wellness team. It's a program that helps prevent type 2 diabetes, and it focuses on helping the members become more active, learn healthier eating, and also addressing, as we mentioned, those comorbidities, stress and anxiety, and healthy sleep. It's done through a digital program, and members are eligible to participate based on their BMI. Having hypertension would be one of the risk factors, their age. If a female were to have gestational diabetes, these are all factors that would weigh into their eligibility for the program. Also, the members are offered a digital scale so that they could accurately track their progress throughout the program. It's a 12-month program, and you'll see there at the bottom of the slide that it's led to a 58% reduction in developing type 2 diabetes. So we've had some good success with that program, and we're just working with the city to figure out ways to better communicate the program to members. We already do quarterly outreaches by email, but we've seen we get more traction when we get communication posted on the employer portals as well. Our condition care is available to members that have asthma. We talked about the preventive diabetes program. The condition care is available to those who are diagnosed with diabetes, also COPD, coronary artery disease, and heart failure. Through that program, they can talk live with the nurse to help them manage their conditions, understand their treatment plans, ask general questions. So again, just a reminder of these programs that are available. We also have our anthem.com site and our Sydney app that highlights a lot of trackers on fitness, caloric intake, how much you're sleeping. So again, a lot of resources available online, in person, by phone through a coach, and also digitally. And I'm excited that for 2026, we're actually going to be introducing a weight management program, which fits in well with the increase that we've seen in obesity in your population. So we'll share more details on that. It has a digital component as well as a phone coaching component. So we'll share more as that rolls out. And then I did want to talk a little bit about Oncology Care Navigator. Dr. Jills, do you want to speak to that one first?
Sure. This is a great program. You know, when our members are diagnosed with cancer, it's a very convoluted system sometimes to navigate. And the navigator actually simplifies this journey and clarifies the complexities of cancer care, reducing burden on the practices so members can focus on their health and well-being. And it helps to facilitate care between the member, the provider, and any facility or hospital. It also reduces the cost of care. There's about a 14% reduction in avoidable inpatient admissions and about a 13 to 17% reduction in unnecessary ED visits. And given that deaths from cancer have not risen, they won't rise, but definitely the incidence of cancer is rising, especially in the population below 50. So this program is really pivotal for those members that engage with it to kind of simplify and streamline cancer care. And we would like to encourage these members to use it when they are diagnosed through the continuum of their care, their cancer care.
And lastly, I'll just highlight, we were just talking about our Anthem website. We also have a cancer care center on our website where newly diagnosed members can get information about understanding their diagnosis. For a member that first gets that diagnosis, it's so overwhelming both for them and their family. And we have tools to support them just with managing their stress, understanding what questions to ask their doctors, what to do after they've completed treatment, because that's often a gap for members. And when they get to that point, and then it also all of a sudden becomes overwhelming as well because they don't know the next steps from there. So we have a survivor toolkit available to them.
And there are also resources for comfort care and hospice.
Yes.
Quick question, who refers the patient to this program? Is the doctor that diagnose the issue or something they have to do themselves already?
So I know our Oncology Navigator program is particularly focused on those that are high risk for having adverse effects from chemotherapy. So we're looking at the claims and clinical information that we have in our system and reaching out to members. However, if a doctor or a Anthem case manager or our member services team feels that the member would be a good fit, they can also self-refer into the program. And then lastly, we did want to highlight on behavioral health, which is a key component when we're looking at the whole health aspect. The city actually has our premium model behavioral health case management, and that comes with, you were talking about identification and how to get into the programs. We're actively looking at your claims to see who's likely to have a behavioral health inpatient stay, who might be at suicide risk, who might have a substance abuse inpatient stay coming up. We're actively monitoring that and reaching out to members and also giving them the opportunity to engage in these programs as well. It also includes a robust programs such as autism spectrum support, dealing with childhood behavioral health disorders. So again, another opportunity to make sure your members are aware of all those resources. And you'll see at the bottom of the page that there's a total of $3,000 in annual savings when you have an integrated model, both medical, behavioral health, and pharmacy. So this was our last slide on the medical section of the presentation. We're going to move over to pharmacy. Any last questions before we bring our pharmacy team up? All right, thank you all. All right. So we have here today Lisa House, who is sitting next to me, our pharmacy account executive, and then Vimal Patel, our pharmacy clinical account director. So I will hand it over to Lisa to get into the slides with the overview for today's data.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Howes. I'm the pharmacy account executive for City of LA, and I'm going to be walking you through through some of the pharmacy trends that's for City of LA. So if we start on this slide, the first row from left to right, in the prior period, we saw an increase in your overall trend of almost 13%. The greatest impact to per member per month increase continues to be drug mix within both specialty and non-specialty categories. Drug mix is measuring the changes in therapy and ultimately changes in the unit cost on a per day basis. So that's what's really driving an increase or overall increase for your specialty and non-specialty spend in the current period. The second box is specific to non-specialty trend, which is at 15%. So this is really a primary contributing factor to conditions in overall increase in pharmacy spend being driven by 16% per member per month increase for diabetes. The third box is specific to specialty trend, and that's at 10.4%. with the primary contributing factor being inflammatory conditions which is driving 8.9 or almost 9% of per member per month increases within that category. So I just want to point out drugs within this category are usually self-injectable, and they're used to treat conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease. We know for inflammatory conditions, it really continues to be the #1 trend driver across the industry and across the Anthem enterprise as well. In fact, it was #1 for the city last year. However, we do see biosimilars as an emerging trend to help keep costs down for drugs within that category, and something we will touch on lightly in the clinical piece of today's presentation. So we're going to jump down to the third row from left to right again. You will see diabetes as your #1 indication by planned cost, driving overall trend, again by 16% on a per member per month basis. That's an increase of 16%, and an increase of patients in the current period from 1,516 to 1,670. Most of this is being driven by the emerging GLP-1 drugs, which we're going to go on, do a deeper dive in the clinical piece of this. And those are available in the marketplace, not only to treat diabetes, but also obesity as far as weight loss category is concerned. The primary driver for increase in total spend, which is the second box on the third row, continues to be that drug Revcovy, used to treat that very rare condition, immunodeficiency disorder. So that's the #1 high cost claimant for both pharmacy as well as medical, which Gilbert touched on. So just this one drug, there were 11 scripts in the prior period and 11 in the current period, is skewing overall trend because the significant cost of the prescription itself. So when you look at specialty costs or percent of specialty costs, if we go over to the pie graph in the lower right-hand corner, you see that it's driving 53% of spend. This is in line with what we typically see with peer benchmark, as well as all groups across the enterprise or Anthem health plans. And those groups are a mixed bag of ASO and fully insured clients. So you guys are on track there. That is what we would normally see. So what you should also know before I hand it over to Gilbert is that specialty trend in general is really being driven by 1 to 2% of your population. So just that very small percentage of your population, not only you, but all of our clients with those very rare and complex conditions is what's driving total spend for pharmacy overall. Any questions?
Do we anticipate these new drugs, the prices eventually going down? Because I know that's the biggest driver, because they're new. Watch television, there's the only thing to see. And how long is it? A couple of years, and all of a sudden we see a decrease, or do we anticipate years?
It's a great question.
Good
Yeah.
question.
I'll go ahead and.
It can, I'm Vimo. Pharmacist.
Thank you.
I'm the clinical account director, but to answer your question specifically, it can take anywhere depending 7 to 10 years. It depends on the complexity of the patent that they have. So for example, like Humira has been out in the market since early 2000s or late 1990 and beyond, but it's been around forever. We just got biosimilars. It's a more complex drug, and the patent was extended for a longer period of time. So it really depends on type of medication you're talking about.
So I think overall, we have to look at the patent system, probably the government that needs to be modified, and so on.
Yeah, part of the problem just overall in the United States is, you hear it on TV all the time.
Right.
We are the innovators, developers of these drugs. And hence, we talk about like GLP-1s, right? They, in other developing countries or other countries that are like UK and Europe, even Canada, they're like a couple $100.
Right.
Here we're paying $1,800 per day.
Right.
It's a big difference in pricing. And it's a lot of different factors that go into that. Hopefully I answered your question to them expiring.
You're saying because we're buying it from the countries that actually are manufacturing, you're saying we're manufacturing?
No, it's because of the the innovation, we tend to lead in terms of the development of these drugs and technology and all of the other things that go into making these drugs come to market. But then Europe has just a different system. Other countries have a system of how they price drugs. Unfortunately, here it's a free enterprise system, so manufacturers can charge what the market bears for the drug.
In the case of the GLP-1, so those are coming from Europe, right?
Some drugs are manufactured here. So they're starting to put factories in the United States. But some of these are made in other countries and they're brought into this country. But the facilities are, again, they're monitored by the FDA in terms of production of the drugs to make sure there's no impurities or anything like that.
My other question is, have you ran what the numbers would be as far as where we would fall in our numbers if you took out the one outlier, just to give an example of would we then be in range?
We can definitely do that, but I can tell you when Lisa went over the materials, that particular member that's using that Revcovi, it's about $355,000 a month. And we mentioned that the members also taken an IVIG product, which is probably another $30,000. So you're talking close to $400,000 a month in just RX costs. So it would definitely bring down the cost because that member alone is around close to $4 million in total spending.
I can provide what non-specialty spend is if you just want to see that it's not in the main deck.
I'm just curious what the percentages are.
The percentage for non-specialty total plant cost is about 17% when you remove specialty from the utilization. And so it's about 16.9%. And overall cost and percent of total plant cost for non-specialty is going to be at 47% versus 53% for specialty.
Yep.
It's almost half.
Interesting.
Right. So I think the next slide is just going over the top 10 indications. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we talked about diabetes, some of the other conditions, cancer, and all of, and HIV and the weight loss or obesity category. But you look at like weight loss as an example, and I'll talk more about the GLP-1s just so we get a good overview of what the products are, what they treat, these GLP-1s. But if you look, it's highlighted in blue on the slide here, but diabetes and weight loss, those are mainly controlled by GLP-1s. And again, we'll talk about those specific medications here in a few slides. And then go to the next slide. So again, these are your top 25 drugs. Again, we talked about Revcovi, we talked about Ozempic, it's a GLP-1 product. We talked about Mounjaro, another GLP-1 product. Down a little bit further, there's Zepbound, which is another GLP-1 product. So I'll go in more detail in terms of what these products are, including Trulicity. So you can definitely see diabetes is definitely a leading category for drug spend in your top 25 drugs. And then let's move to, I think there's a lot of interest in terms of what these products are. So if we talk about GLP-1 specifically, you've got, when they originally came to market, those drugs were used to treat type 2 diabetes. As you mentioned about commercials, they mention when you see the Ozempic commercial, one of the key highlights that they mention is about the weight loss component. Right? So hence the interest of making Ozempic developed by Novo Nordisk into a drug called Wegovy. It's the same identical chemical ingredient, just available in a different strength, higher strength. So that causes more weight loss than Ozempic did. And then if you move over, the latest product that entered the marketplace was Zepbound, which has shown more propensity to cause weight loss. So that's what's currently taking more of the market share in terms of the weight loss component. And Zepbound just recently got an approval for OSA, which is obstructive sleep apnea. But the way that we're viewing it, Carolina RX or Anthem, is it will only be approved if the member has obesity as the primary component for the obstructive sleep apnea, because it really works when a member reduces weight. It's how you get rid of the sleep apnea or reduction in symptoms of sleep apnea.
Question, do we see, the use of these medications on the other side, the reduction of the medical expenses of costs? Well, the big question, what's the return on investment?
Yeah, I'll answer that question next on the next slide. We do have some information on that. And based on the study we've done within our own data and some other external studies that we've looked at. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But just to highlight what happened was when these products first came to market, like specifically like Ozempic, we did see a lot of inappropriate prescribing. So doctors and patients were using it for weight loss, not for a member who had type 2 diabetes. So hence, over the years, we've strengthened our criteria to make sure require a definite diagnosis of type 2 diabetes as part of the component when these medications are prescribed, because we saw a lot of people just using it for weight loss. Now, for the weight loss component, we know state of California has a mandate in place where we have to cover when a member has morbid obesity. Morbid obesity is defined in rate with a BMI greater than equal to 40. So that's how your membership currently is able to get products in that weight loss category. So it's important because you see in your top 25 drugs the percentage of the population, and Gilbert mentioned, we just talked about percentage of the population that's considered morbidly obese. And this category is just obesity. The category for these drugs, remember, in order to qualify is morbid obesity, which is BMI. It's quite a bit higher. And then, we talked about some of the other indications, but moving on, like I said, I'm not going to focus too much on the next slide. We've already kind of talked about the intents or the number of prescriptions that have been written for these products. And you can see it on the next slide here. And then specifically on this slide, to answer your question, we did a real evidence-based study on our own population looking at GLP-1 products. What we saw was, obviously, with these products, because of the dosing, saw higher increase or higher incidences of hospitalization because of nausea, vomiting, things of that sort. And then we saw that most people don't complete therapy for more than 6 months just because of the side effect profile. So somebody will take it for 2-3 months, and the side effects are too much. I'll stop it. They may gain the weight back, and they come back onto it a few months later, right? So that we did see quite a bit of that. And 40% of the patients even get to 1 year of therapy. So that's quite a high number of patients that have never even completed therapy. Then when you asked about the question about the significance of, have we seen reduction in medical costs? Data is too young, too early for these medications right now. We just haven't seen it yet. Even in our own population, when we looked at like cardiovascular events in patients that were taking the older type of weight loss drugs like Qsymia and Contrave, comparing it to GLP-1, we saw no differences in terms of CV events that happen with that type of membership. That's cardiovascular events. That's what I mean by CV events. And then, so when we looked at like when Wegovy got approved, it was approved through the SELECT trial. Next. Yep. So the actual, when you look at what was publicized on the media and everywhere else, they said there was a 20% reduction in symptoms of cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke. Well, if you really look at the data, you had a treatment group that was treated, then you had a non-treatment group that didn't get the Wegovy. And when you compared, it was only a 1.5% difference between the two treatment groups. So your overall, what we call in the industry, what we really look at is absolute risk reduction. So somebody got the drug versus somebody that didn't get the drug, there was only a 1.5% higher risk, right? That's what we're looking at. So again, the key thing I want to say is that interpretation based on this study, 67 people would need to be treated for 34 months. So that's 67 people, 34 months at a cost of $3.4 million to prevent one cardiovascular. So kind of asking what question you asked earlier. We just haven't seen the data yet. Again, it's too early, I think, because these drugs have only been in the marketplace a few years. So hopefully that answers some questions. Yeah.
Following up on that, what would be the timeline where we would expect to see?
The studies are ongoing right now. So it does take, again, what we talked about in the last slide, especially when you're treating obesity, when you see the number of people that stop, it's hard to see and evaluate, are these drugs really working to save on the medical side. So we've got these trials got to be enrolled where patients are continuously taking these drugs and are being monitored to get the long-term impact of what happens on cardiovascular, stroke, different symptoms like that.
And then how does that, when you're looking at the overall return on the investment, the people who are stopping it before they can complete the course of therapy, that needs to be added in too somehow, because that's still a part of the cost and it's a failure. So all of that is all cost outlay and fail.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think what Nicole mentioned earlier about the weight management program that we're going to introduce in 2026. Now, Our ASO clients we already have that in place for them. We just started that. We're going to push it out into our fully insured book of business. But I think one of the things is patients do qualify for these drugs, that they're great drugs. I'm not discounting anything that they do. They're really wonderful drugs. We've got to make sure we monitor them from a side effect profile. If you're going to spend $1,800 a month and then somebody stops it after 3 months, you've wasted that amount, right? So you've got to have a goal as part of the weight management program where you've got to make sure they're eating better. That's part of the component of the weight management program. Make sure they're doing their diet, their exercise. And then on top of that, making sure that they're following and continuing to take these drugs. If they have side effects, that's fine. Maybe you reduce the dose, right? But you've got to make sure that we get them to a goal. So if their weight is 200, we want to get them to a goal of 160. Let's say we get them to 160. How do you at that point evaluate potentially how that patient can manage and stay off of the drug at that point? Once they get to their target, you see modify their behaviors. That's kind of things we'll look at for successful treatment.
Thank you.
Good. And then quickly, just to go over what's happening with these GLP-1 products, if you look at the landscape, I mentioned Zepbound before we put these slides together. It just recently got approved for that obstructive sleep apnea. So you'll see that right there in fourth quarter 2024. Going into what's happening, Ozempic just got the indication for chronic kidney disease. So that's another indication. But in order to have chronic kidney disease, you have to have type 2 diabetes. So I kind of feel like we've already been treating that with the indication for type 2 diabetes. Now, if you move all the way to the right side, the indication that really is, that could potentially have a higher cost for these products is in the middle, third quarter of 2025, with Wegovy actually getting the approval for MASH. And MASH is another way to say somebody who has fatty liver that's not tied to alcohol. How you get that is somebody who's technically overweight or obese is one of the clinical symptom signs of somebody that could develop MASH. So again, we have to wait for the trials to see what the trials say, how the drug gets approved before we can give any guidance on how we would look at covering that medication for that specific indication.
Is that the same as NASH? I'm familiar with NASH. Is this the same or
No, so there is a NASH. It's non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
I take that back. It is kind of the same thing. They just change the terminology technically. So it's just, and what happens is when somebody technically, and I'm not saying it happens to everybody, when somebody does have MASH, they can end up having cirrhosis and end up either with potentially, I'm not saying everyone, but that have that liver transplant, potentially they could develop liver cancer. So those are some of the end symptoms that patients, and this is a silent disease and nobody knows they have it. And one of the ways they diagnose is through biopsy, but the symptoms to be really, really severe. So somebody could have it for 10 years, not even know they have it. Something like that pops up with get biopsy. Thanks. And the last slide is just to give you a little bit more, I kind of talked about the MASH, what it is. So we already went into that, just kind of give you what we're looking at in terms of potential for increasing the utilization of these products for other conditions outside of type 2 diabetes. We already talked about sleep apnea.
Right. Well, that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for the time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
We're going to start back at the top of the agenda.
Okay. Then we are at item 4. Oh, that's right. Quorum. You're right. That's right. I forgot we didn't have a quorum before. Sorry, everybody. There was really bad traffic coming from my area. Okay, so call to order 9:51. Can you do the roll call, please?
Okay, thank you, Shauna. So for roll call, we are going to start with the employee organizations and then management. Shauna Janeway in for Janina. I apologize for mispronunciation.
Iguela, yeah. Here.
Marlene Fonseca.
Yeah.
Lisa Palumbi.
Here.
Gracie Liu,
Present.
Tony Royster,
Here.
Paul Gerard in for Matt Seismo,
Present.
Eddie Santos in for Holly Wilcott.
Here.
Thank you all. We have quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments?
For attendees on the phone, can you please press *9 on your phone to be placed in line for the speaker queue? For attendees in the room, can you please bring your speaker card to the front desk? Okay. Looks like there are no attendees on the Zoom queue or in person.
Thank you. So moving on to the minutes, we've got 4 sets of minutes to approve from last year, August 1st, October 3rd, May 16th, and August 14th. Do we have a motion do we need to do those separately or can we bulk approve? We can just do, okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead and do the vote.
I will do roll call for the vote. Shauna Janeway,
Yes.
Marlene Fonseca,
Aye.
Lisa Palombi,
Aye.
Gracie Liu.
Aye.
Tony Royster,
Aye.
Paul Gerard in for Matt Seismo,
Aye.
Eddie Santos in for Holly Wilcott. Sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry. The vote was unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. So moving on to item 4, the committee report 2503 on staffing reimbursement second quarter.
Thank you, Shauna. I will be taking this report for Ted. So for this report, staff is recommending the approval of reimbursements from the Employee Benefits Trust Fund for personnel department salary costs of 3 LEO program staff positions, as well as 2 Live Well program staff positions in the amount of $156,000 and $92,000 respectively. And this would cover the first quarter of the 2024 through 2025 fiscal year. Is there any questions I can answer?
Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve? Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. We do the vote.
Okay, thank you all. Shauna, your vote?
Aye.
Marlene, your vote?
Aye.
Lisa, your vote?
Aye.
Gracie, your vote?
Aye.
Tony, your vote?
Aye.
Paul, your vote?
Aye.
And Penny, your vote?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes are unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving right along to item 5, committee report 2504 on the disability insurance contract extension.
Good morning. I'm Isela Jurado, benefits analyst with the Employee Benefits Division, and I'm going to review some information on the disability contract with you guys. I need to go back in time to do that. So at the June 8th, 2017 meeting, it was recommended that the JLMBC recommend to the general manager of the personnel department to initiate execution of the agreement between the standard and the city for life, disability, and AD&D insurance services. The standard was awarded a contract for 3 years with the ability for the city to extend up to 2 additional 1-year terms for a maximum term of 5 years or from 2018 through 2022. This contract was extended for years 2023 and 2024 due to COVID-19 and due to the workday transition. The extension was through December 31st, 2024 for a total of a 7-year contract term. The recommendation was made at the November 4th, 2021 meeting. Now, during RFPs for 2025 services, MetLife was selected for a period of 3 years with an option of 2 additional 1-year extensions to provide disability insurance services for 2025 and beyond. The recommendation to select MetLife was made at the June 6, 2024 meeting. MetLife was awarded a contract beginning January 1st, 2025 and ending on December 31st, 2027 with the additional 2 1-year options. Now, at the August 14th, 2024 meeting, the JLMBC approved a recommendation to extend the contract with the standard for 1 year since the city's ability to continue negotiating a contract
for MetLife for disability services had ended. The city and its consultant, Keenan, were informed that MetLife's inability to successfully file with the Department of Insurance to administer the plan in the same manner as the incumbent. MetLife stated that it was unable to modify proposed short-term and long-term disability rates to match what the standard had provided. The city discovered that a Department of Insurance final determination could take weeks or months after MetLife filed Department of Insurance filing in July 2024. Open enrollment timing, printing of materials, and system testing beginning in September made it impossible for the city to wait for a Department of Insurance final decision. Due to the limited time left before open enrollment began, the uncertainty of MetLife's ability to provide services, it was recommended that disability services awarded to MetLife be canceled. And there was insufficient time to begin negotiations with the next bidder. The recommendation was to fully cancel the disability RFP and continue services with the standard, for an additional year, which will make it a total of 8 years while staff looked at options. The standard has agreed to change the benefit waiting period to include injury on duty of workers' compensation employees through the extension of 2025. This was a large component of the RFPs, which was able to be accomplished by the standard under the current pricing structure of its contractual services agreement with the city. Additional items included in the RFP for disability services cannot be absorbed within the regular service agreement and would require a competitive process for the city to consider. Staff strongly believes that having disability and life insurance contracts in the same cycle is important, despite the desire to see changes made to the disability insurance plan options that are available to LA members. So in order to align with the contractual terms of the life insurance program, staff feels that the current disability services are sufficient to meet members' needs, and that it's in the best interest of both the members and the city to extend the current services with the standard so it can match the contractual terms of the life insurance program. Therefore, staff recommends a 2-year extension with the incumbent disability service provider to continue short-term and long-term disability services through plan year 2027. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question about what is the reason that it's a good thing to have the life and disability on the same track?
That way, when RFPs come up again, we can go ahead and when the RFP process comes up again, we can put out to bid for everything at the same time.
Right.
They also can complement each other as a service. So that is a big thing. But the when there's a transition between disability and unfortunately, the services can complement each other. There is a little bit of back and forth to it. We are handling that right now with the 2 different vendors. As like a file feed kind of exchange between life insurance and disability. But to that degree of complementation, there can be improvements if it's the same vendor. And it can also be a bundling price advantage as well if it's the same vendor. But it's not required to be the same vendor.
Okay. So that would be a total of 10 years. Is that, how much of an outlier is that to do 10 years? I don't know the history that far back to know. How often does that happen?
It has not in this program. That has not happened. At least in our tenure being in the program.
Okay.
And it is still subject to council approval.
Okay.
Correct.
Did MetLife ever finish getting filed with the DOI, or did they just suspend all activity once we canceled?
I believe and would have to ask, but I believe they retracted since there was no longer, since we canceled the services, there is no need to continue with their filing. But we did not receive an update with them on what that happened or if they continue.
Is that likely to, in 2028, is that likely to be a holdup again? Is that something with the timing of the RFP and the review that a company as big as MetLife couldn't get their filing done in time for us? It seems good.
I think from our perspective in going through this process, this was a learning activity, right? We learned that in the RFP process that we do again, we need to be more explicit about this particular component and identify how whatever vendor comes through can accommodate it and ensure that it can happen at the point of proposing to whatever degree, instead of finding out afterwards that there's a complication. I think that would be our perspective on that, and that we also would have time over this 2-year period to look a little bit more into other options with the disability benefit program and look at different ways that we could consider things at that time. 2 years is not that far away. So we would be starting to look at that now.
So were we unaware at the time that we offered or awarded the contract that they weren't filed with the state?
Well, the filing is, and I'll have Keenan probably speak better to that because you're going to use terminology that's better than mine. But our
it was really the filing. It was a timing issue, and the timing issue was not on the city. It was on the carrier part, on with MetLife. They should have filed a lot more time for it, and as things were moving forward, they wouldn't have had the filing completed in time for the process to be concluded and go into open enrollment and all those other things. So, from our perspective, MetLife should have started that filing process a lot sooner than being awarded the contract. They should have known they have an opportunity, start the paperwork and all that, not wait until the contract was awarded and start the process then, because they simply could not have made it. And then complications came up with the contract with covering certain folks, which exacerbated the situation.
So is that something we would or could require moving forward? Granting?
Definitely lessons learned is confirming in the RFP that any filing requirements will be done on a timely basis, and that we're getting assurance that by a certain date those things are happening. Now, of course, we're asking for assurances with the state, which isn't always guaranteed, but we'll make sure that they have the disclosure that they need, that they understand who they're covering, how they're covering them, how they're coordinating, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
But is it possible to put in the RFP that in order to bid, you have to have that requirement? If you don't have it, you can't bid.
Yeah.
And that, if you do that, it's covered. My concern about MetLife is if you have this issue with disability, what the other stuff there.
Part of the issue with MetLife became one of there was a requirement that they felt they could not meet in it, and that's why there was a delay in getting that coverage. And so those are things that they should have known, they should have disclosed much earlier on, which they didn't.
I think we have to prevent that is in order for you to bid, you need to, it's like a driver's license. If you don't have it, you can't apply.
Right.
And then that stops that right there because it seems kind of shaky and concerned about the other things, the big one. If they're having issues with small stuff, and a company that size should be used to dealing with business and company. We have special issues, and they should be prepared for that. But I think it's best for us to already have it. If you can't provide it in the process, you don't follow.
Right. And those lessons right there are, as we go into the medical RFP process, it's almost on our minds as well too, because
could this be around? I mean, this could be an issue in these new plan options that we're looking at, correct?
Yeah, they need to give us disclosure what they can and can't do, and so that we can evaluate them appropriately.
I have a quick question. The report notes that the standard is changing the benefit waiting period through the end of 2025. Is the assumption that they'll continue that through 27?
Correct.
Can you guys remind me what the IOD payment issue was? I know I knew, I mean, I know it was my concern as well.
Sure. So the structure, the definition in the policy before 2025 was injury on duty pay was not considered a loss of pay or a loss necessarily because it's still actively within it. And so an employee that was looking towards disability to get a benefit, a response, excuse me, a payout, they would qualify at the beginning of that period. And so the amount of time when they're on our benefit protection plan that they would have to be able to continue benefits when they stopped getting that pay was shortened because that first 12 months that they're receiving IOD pay, they're already getting a benefit from the standard. So they're getting double duty. They're getting a payment from the city. They're also getting a benefit from the standard. The standard's benefit would arguably be decreased because they're still getting pay. And then the amount of time that they could stay on benefits after they stopped getting a city paycheck was reduced because our maximum for benefit protection plan is 2 years. So the ask was to include that pay into the concept of the benefit waiting period so that their first qualification would be when their city paycheck stops, when the IOD pay stops. And that way it's kind of a win-win to the employee because that's when they actually have loss.
Right.
And we just needed the policy to be able to accommodate for it.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, if not, do we have a motion to approve the recommendation? Moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Can we do the vote?
Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Gracie, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Penny, your vote.
Aye.
The vote, the ayes are unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, Committee Report 2506 on wildfire impacted employees.
Okay, for this report, I will also be presenting again. Staff is recommending that the JLMBC consider the temporary suspension of the LUL program's eligibility rules regarding compensated hours for employees directly affected by the wildfires. Due to the recent wildfires, a number of residential areas as well as certain city facilities have been damaged. For the affected city facilities, the damage has been significant enough to prevent reopening or use for an unknown period of time. Since the start of the wildfires, city staff has received one member outreach regarding access to benefits due to loss of home and workplace as a result of the fires. Employees who are medically unable to work as a result of the fire and were supported by medical assessment may qualify for disability insurance coverage under the LUL program and may also qualify for benefits that can be covered through the benefits protection plan. This and other support has been circulated via citywide email and is available on the Live Well Wildfire Resource website. Currently, staff is expecting that employees who may not meet the hours requirement would be reflected on the February 2nd paycheck. Under the billing process, employees who did not meet the sufficient hour requirement would be sent an invoice under the direct bill process and be provided with a 2-week period to make payment before a final invoice and another 2-week payment period is provided. As such, there is some time to take action to suspend the working hours requirement only for those employees who are directly impacted by loss due to the recent wildfires. If adopted, this action would be similar to the moratorium that was enacted during the pandemic, but on a much more narrow and targeted scope. Staff is recommending that the suspension of hours be applied on a case-by-case basis and also applied on a pay period basis. This hour suspension is currently viewed as being a request-based option, but can be added to the LUL website and communicated to employees as well as included in any direct bill invoices if needed. Should this be approved, staff will be bringing this back for regular updates to the JLMBC. Is there any questions I can answer regarding this report?
Instead of pay period by pay period basis, that would preclude you from doing a multi-pay period.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but we would have to assess what the employee situation is in terms of hours and their situations after each pay period.
Right. So it could be.
But it could, so that suspension could apply for multiple pay periods. But in practice, we would have to review each pay period and apply that suspension by pay period. You're welcome.
And if city council does pass the relief time that's been proposed, how would that, and that's probably going to be retroactive where people will be swapping out vacation and sick hours, but was that on your radar when you thought of this recommendation? And is it part of the suite of ideas that the city council is contemplating?
That one, the latter. So this would be in the event that exactly the program that you brought up is not active, and an employee is actually has no time. There's not another option necessarily, right? So this would not be a benefit on top of a benefit. It would be implemented as a
What did you say? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. This would be an either or. So if the city council passes that program that Lisa brought up, the employee will either, obtain benefit from that program or from the suspension of rules here.
But that time is not indefinite either.
If the program or when the program gets launched, it's based on donation. So it would be on the pool of availability, assuming there are that they.
So if they expire that program and this program is still in effect, could they jump to this one?
If they pass the assessment and review it, then and if this recommendation is still enforced, then yes.
We don't know what the program is. It has been negotiated.
What program? It's not at city council here, right?
It's the
committee, you mean the committee?
to
25
Negotiate.
0639 is referring to or something.
At the committee level.
But
Well, it went to committee, it came back to council, and we're supposed to move forward with the reporting that we, meaning you.
I don't think anyone would argue that it's not a negotiation,
Oh, no,
even if it's a benefit.
sure.
So
If this passes, could it be retro? Like say somebody went, at the very beginning, January 12th or whatever the first pay period was, used medical services, but then didn't have the hours and are getting billed for the services they use. Would you consider retro applications or is it?
Yeah. I think so we are thinking this is a small group. This is gonna be something that we'll be able to have management control over to do something a little bit more out of practice, right? To be able to go an extra step to somebody who isn't able to notify us right away, right? Maybe that person that's being impacted is not able to talk to us and we don't hear from them until March or even later. We should be able to have management control over that to be able to address them and ensure that their health benefits continued retroactively in this case, but on the case by case basis of being able to that they're actually impacted and qualify.
And the bills the invoices that you send, you only send by mail or are they also by email? And I'm saying this just because there's still reports of lots of mail sitting in Altadena waiting to be picked up. So
Currently, the direct bill invoices are only sent via mail. So you do bring up a good point.
I think it's going to be a word of mouth discussion, right? So we will rely to a certain degree on HR or something else being able to say, let these individuals know, like, hey, if you're concerned about your benefits or something else, make sure you're talking to the benefits division. I will say we've had 2 individual contacts already. So at least there is some degree of communication happening. to the potentially impacted employees.
I'll go ahead and make the motion. Sorry.
I was waiting to ask my question. Okay, no, I started. The term directly impacted, how is that being defined? I know there's a reference to the database. Is it a certain, I haven't looked at the database. I didn't look at the database, so I don't know if there's a particular like code or something or.
If I'm not mistaken, that database that we are looking at, you are able to view. So the thought process is that if employee by direct impact, so employee is claiming that their home was burned in the fire, we using that database can vet that that is correct. That the employee's home was burned due to the wildfire.
Mhm.
And if there's also another claim that their city facility workplace was affected by the wildfire and it's closed, we are able to vet that information and can use both to make a determination as to whether the suspension of rules would be applicable for this employee.
So it would be just if it was burned, not if it was smoke damaged. So I know there's some that are smoke damaged and I can't imagine, it'd be very challenging to.
The good thing about the setup being case by case is we can have the flexibility to be able to have the employee identify the claim or the
Situation and
right. The key thing we're trying to say is that somebody actually has status in one of those two areas, is not completely in a different county in identifying that
Right.
they felt impact, right? And I'm saying that because we've had questions, right? So that's where we're trying to draw the line, is that somebody has some sort of actual status in those areas. Where we can call the status is lots of flexibility though.
Yeah, I was also thinking about like the mudslides that happened afterwards. And so, you didn't get burnt, but then you got hit with that. So, okay, thank you. And there was, you were talking about, potentially some outreach. I would definitely be in favor of that. If there's potentially some kind of targeted outreach, I know, I'll say for our union specifically, we did do some targeted outreach to particular members that were identified in our database as being in those areas. And so if there's some way to, if there's some way to do something similar, some targeted outreach, and yeah, that would be fantastic. And please do share any communications with us so that we can have that as a
Pass that on.
reference for other members as well and help to amplify that.
Certainly, that's something we can look into as to doing further communication to potentially impacted members.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sorry. Was there any more questions or? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So I'll make the motion to temporarily suspend eligibility rules.
Second.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and do the vote.
Thank you. Shama, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Gracie, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote. Penny, your vote.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so informational items, we already did 7, so 8, committee report 2506.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to try to go through this somewhat promptly. This is a report back from last meeting. There were a lot of questions, requests for this report. I think we captured everything. But definitely we can go over anything related to the medical RFP. So this is a report back on the status of the medical RFP, a few different things that has happened with it so far, and also some information on the potential HDHP and HSA. So if we start with page 3 of the report, the top of the report, that is our deadline or the official timeline that we've published. The proposals, the RFP was released on January 17th. Proposals are due in 1 month on Tuesday, March 4th. We will be coming back to the JLMBC at its April meeting with the preliminary update. And then we'll go through a best and final process. And then magically and quickly on May 1st meeting, we'll be back in this committee giving a recommendation. The pre-proposal conference was held on the 31st of January. At the bottom of page 3, you'll see the attendees that attended. We made it mandatory because we wanted to make sure that everybody that was attending knew what to do and how this process was going to work, and there weren't going to be any hiccups through that process. That's the only reason it was mandatory. But these are the companies. I won't read them out loud unless someone can't see the list, but these are the companies that I identified. A company would need to meet minimum requirements, which means they have to have the ability to directly offer insurance, have practice of 10 years or more in offering insurance plans, and some other small financial status requirements to be able to submit a bid. So as long as any of those companies meets that, which the majority of them do, they should be able to submit a bid. On page 4, going to scoring, there was a question over what our scoring methodology and how it's going to work ultimately. And maybe it's easier to discuss this by looking at the table on the top of page 5. So we have traditionally offered RFPs with a qualitative and quantitative method of scoring. That still exists in this RFP option. The top part is the questionnaire tab of this massive 27-something tab workbook that we've have all the bidders submit. But it's just one tab that's a questionnaire tab. That will be qualitative, meaning we're scoring it on a word score between unsatisfactory and excellent, seven different bands between that. That is going to be awarded out of those 6 different sections there, a total of 500 points. Then the quantitative, meaning that we're just going to score a numerical score, is the rest of the workbook that's identified there. And then each section as listed there is going to be worth a total value of a number of points. So the plan design section is going to be worth a total of 500 points. The cost section, all those tabs that identify how kind of cost is going to work will be a total of 700 points. And then disruption will be a total of 300 points. You'll see on that table towards the right, there are 7 columns, all with the same numbers on them, the same value of 2,000 total points. So all bidders that bid are going to be asked to bid per plan and will be evaluated per plan. So we will be coming back with a final recommendation and a final score at least 7 times. There could be, the city reserves the right in the RFP to award more than one bidder, more than one plan per type. So we could come back with a recommendation to award 7 plans. We could come back with a recommendation to award more than 7 plans, or we could come back with a recommendation to award less than that. The RFP also identified that we're looking at up to 3 providers. So right now we have 2 medical providers that are providing 5 different plans. We're looking at potentially having up to 3 over all these different plan types. Moving on, if there's no questions immediately, moving on to section E. These are the plan types that how they translate in the bottom table there. So the 2 new plan types that we're asking for, or 3 new plan types that we're asking for, are the HDHP and the EPO. Those are brand new. On the bottom of page 6, we talk descriptively about disruption. So the way that we have organized disruption in this concept, we are telling the bidders that we are wanting to understand from them how they are going to handle disruption. We recognize through the beginning of this process that a bidder coming in is not going to be able to match network 1 for 1. If they're looking for, we're not asking for full replacement necessarily. Instead, we're asking for them to tell us how they're going to manage that disruption. So the members that do not have a doctor in the PPO plan that's in network, what is the conversation for them to understand how to access services, to use it as a network, or to whatever the other options are. Through the process, We will be having them give back a lot of data telling us which doctors, which facilities, which hospitals are in network, out of network for the plans that they have, if it is the first 5 types that we currently offer. And then we will be also asking them to narratively identify what their short-term and long-term plan is in being able to handle disruption for our members. That's how they're going to be scored over those 300 points. There was a question on our plan change options, and more specifically going into default, so at the top of page 7. Our plan options that we discussed with the members, things that we're considering in this committee, which we'll be talking about a lot over the next few months. And there's another report, if we get to it, giving how we're going to be giving updates to this committee. But the big probably conversation piece maybe out of those 6 items, I can't count, at the top of page 7, maybe the bigger conversation is default. We talked a little bit in this committee about how we want to change how default works potentially. In current way that we've managed default, it has been the lowest cost plan that hits the largest number of people. So when a new hire employee comes in and they're so excited about their job that they ignore everything that we're telling them, and day 61 comes and goes and they get defaulted into employee only coverage, we are defaulting them into Kaiser because that is currently the lowest price plan that hits the highest number of people. But it is not the lowest price plan in the current menu. There is a cheaper one, but we have not set that as the default because it does not reach employees that live outside of a certain geographic area. So the concept that we're considering is having more than one default plan option and then assigning that default plan based on the employee's zip code. So if an employee lives in Riverside and another employee lives in Los Angeles, and they both do absolutely nothing through their new hire offer and default, they may default into 2 completely different plans based on where they live. That would be a savings to the city in concept because the city is paying a subsidy that will be lower than a plan that covers both regions. But we won't know that until we see the actual premium for that year, for whatever the plan year is going to be. And we will be discussing this in committee. It just hasn't come up as a conversation all that much when the committee has been adopting the plan for each year because it's been pretty static as a concept. But it would be something that we would adopt through the plan adoption when we bring that for JLMBC to adopt for the calendar year. Then moving on to HDHP. Before I move on to that topic, because that one's probably going to take a little bit, there is the attachment here is the full RFP, the full document that was posted and is available now for everybody. If there's any questions or any topics you wanted to go over that, we can. But in attachment to A2, it is a lot of documents. You don't have to go there on the slide necessarily, but that is everything that someone is going to be responding to. And in that massive number of pages and Excel sheets, there are a few slides or a few pages that speak to plan design. That are the options that we're asking the bidders to fill out when we're talking about alternatives. So we're asking them to identify if they're responding to one of our 5 plans that we currently offer. So HMO in-network, HMO integrated HMO, non-integrated HMO regional, full network, PPO. If they're responding to one of those or bidding on one of those plans, we're going to ask them, can you match our current plan services? And in addition to matching the current plan services, we're going to ask them, can you provide an alternative option, which might be a difference in a copay. It might be a difference in a deductible. It might be some other differences, small differences, but we're asking them to bid on that as well. And that's where we're talking. That's where we have talked a lot about plan design, current versus alternatives. Then going back to our HDHP conversation. So on the top of page 8, one of the plan options that we've asked for through this RFP has been something this committee's talked about a lot, and there's a lot of conversation over the past few years of a high deductible health plan, which is required by IRS to have with it a health savings account. In establishing that, the employer can offer an employer contribution. The employee can contribute whatever they want to their health savings account within a certain limit set by the IRS each year. We would establish, if we do end up selecting that as an option, we would establish the whole process of how that would work, how an employee would actually make elections and all that administrative function. But if the employer, if the city of Los Angeles wanted to provide an employer contribution to the health savings account, right now, this committee does not have the authority technically to do that. The authority for the LOF program is split up under the ad code in two different sections, and then MOUs have a lot of reference towards it as well. Right now, the two sections of authority are split between the trust fund authority, how our money is managed, and how this committee has approval to approve expenditures from the fund. And then the general concept of how benefits work for any non-represented person or any person who does not have a item in their MOU that covers that particular subject. So on the trust fund side, which is the first section in the report on Chapter 95, the trust fund identifies how this committee can make choices of how to expend funds for plan services, but it narrowly describes those expenditures as the payment of premiums, the payment of cash in lieu to an employee directly, and then the payment of administrative and overhead costs. The concept of an employer contribution to an account is not explicitly identified in there. I tried to make an argument with legal about it being a administrative cost, and that didn't work out. So we would have to, for the fund, for that money to come out of the fund, it's not required to necessarily, but for that money to come out of the fund and be something that the JLMBC could do, that particular section of the ad code would have to be modified. We'd have to amend it to allow for employer contributions. On the other section of the code, so for the health plan administration, there is not a reference towards employer contributions. So if it was decided for this committee to be in a position to negotiate for what an employer contribution to a health services account would be and what that rate would be, it would be recommended that we amend that section of the ad code of section 4307 to allow for this committee to do that. Alternatively, that might not be the direction that everybody wants to go. This might be something that gets negotiated individual MOUs, although from a staff perspective, we would not like that. It would be, from an administrative point of view, we'd want to have one employer contribution consistently applied to anybody who has an account. It would be very difficult for us to manage different employer contribution amounts over different bargaining groups and different time periods. But there are options of how we would go through an authority route to do so. So, go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to preempt what you were going to think, but as far as the timing, it's a really tight timeline on the RFP and getting the results of the RFP. If we went the HSA route, have you built in time for doing that admin code change?
So the ad code change route can happen quick enough under the timeline that we're talking about, assuming there is no resistance in getting it approved. But in theory, we should be able to pull that off in time for an election. We don't have to pull it off by June when this committee needs to make an adoption of a plan necessarily. We need to have that language enforced before we actually act on things. It's better to do it as soon as possible. But we do have some buffer time to be able to do that. And I could be completely missing something, but it is a very simple ad code language change to be able to do this aspect. And we've changed the ad code on multiple occasions. So it's not out of our wheelhouse. It is also something, arguably, that we might not want to consider starting until after there's more desire from the committee and from the city to even go down this route. So that there could be definitely a different point of view, but it may be most prudent to wait until we see what these plans offerings look like before we decide which road to go down. So that is the pretty much the recap. I think I hope I hit on all the components that were questions from our previous meeting. But are there any other questions over anything with this aspect?
I just have a couple quick questions based on this. You mentioned 3 providers. Is that the grade providers?
We're entertaining up to 3 different providers, medical providers.
No more than 3. Has the city ever offered 3 before?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Is it common in public sector?
Yeah, we have seen that happen in other agencies as well. And I think Keenan can speak to that too.
And I mean, like the folks that are putting in their bids, are they aware of this?
We did describe it in the pre-proposal conference. It is also listed in somewhere in this massive 100-something pages of RFP as a sentence. But we did describe that verbally and on the slide deck for the pre-proposal conference. The pre-proposal slide deck is also included in this attachment as attachment, I think it's D or C.
And then just really quickly on the disruption, it sounds like you're asking them to kind of forecast what they might be able to do, but with no guarantees.
Correct. Well, so there's a partial guarantee. So in that disruption section for what the RFP administrators will be, our evaluators will be looking at, one of those components is essentially a signed kind of plan, an ask for them to, for the most part, promise or say like what they're willing to do or how they're willing to be able to handle this. So it's, I guess the word guarantee is maybe quasi applicable.
Because it sounds like they have to get somebody else to agree to what they, right?
Well, the concept is, okay, so let's say the plan offering that somebody proposes only has 50% of the doctors and facilities that the current network offers. So the ask is, how are you going to be able to, under multiple different steps, how are you going to be able to address the other 50? So can you work on a plan to negotiate and add those doctors into your plan? Can you work on an extension or different aspect of continuity of care so that employees that are seeking those services can have a different or a better impact on still doing that while they're learning this transition? What are your education? What are the additional things you're going to do to be able to help those individuals find your a doctor in network or a facility in network? We're asking them really, what can you do to go above and beyond kind of a normal transition process to be able to address this? That is just from their point of view. We as staff and as this plan program is being administered, recognize that we're going to have to do something a lot more as well. A lot addition. That's speaking back towards the health educator job position that we're trying to include in this. Which just a matter of fact is not going to be in place for this open enrollment because that's not physically possible, but as an ongoing basis will be. But for this open enrollment, before these services start on January 1st of 2026, we're going to be doing as much as we can. There's going to be a huge conversation piece that we'll have in this committee on how we have the education work and how we have this dialogue with employees that might be needing to consciously understand what this change means to them. That speaks a little bit also to that passive enrollment change. We don't want to force every employee to do active enrollment. We can't handle that. But we would want to look at a way to ensure that people recognize and acknowledge that they have this change with them, right? That they at least can say, yes, I saw my benefit package. I understand. I'm cool with whatever happens to me. Like whatever way, we still need to brainstorm what we could do, but we definitely need to have people more engaged, no matter what our change is. We need to have people more engaged this time, and so that they can at least ask a question of what this means.
Yeah, last question, I promise. And just because you mentioned something on that, when you're going to be, or I know down the road, when you're looking at default and how you said you would be selecting, is that something that you guys would be doing manually, staff out of benefits? Or is that something the consultants would do? Or how
Right now it runs through program. So we have not gone as far as being able to establish a setup with our third-party administrator, but it would be in concept. So the employee goes into Workday, they put in their information, or their HR does it. And so their address information is identified in the employer's payroll system. We cannot create, as we talked about in this committee, we cannot create a benefits offer for someone if we do not have address, because it is a legally required field for enrolling them into insurance. So they have their zip code in that system. The file comes over into the third-party system to create the benefit offer, and based on that zip code, puts them in whatever bucket they are going to go into for the default plan options.
Thank you. Any more questions?
So we already have HSAs. The issue would be,
Well,
what do we, oh, no, we're flexible.
yes. But it's a good point. It's a good point because the IRS is explicitly clear you cannot be in both, one or the other. So we will be, that's as another education piece. Anybody who is actively participating in a healthcare flexible spending account, if they choose to go to the HCHP, they have to understand and acknowledge, goodbye flexible spending account, hello HSA. The HSA is much more flexible. That's not the best word. Broader on the uses that you can use. So you can use that HSA for pretty much everything that you currently use your flexible spending account for. You just can't double dip.
And it rolls over, I think, right?
The HSA, yeah.
Mhm.
It not only does it roll over, it continues with the employee for forever. So after they leave city service, they take that money with them.
Any more questions? All right, thank you. Moving on to item 9, medical RFP education presentation.
The second part of this education series as we go through the RFP process, just so that as we come up with recommendations, you kind of understand the terms and how all of the pieces come together.
Actually, before you start there, I did have an issue with the benchmark section. You referenced County of Los Angeles in there. I sit on that committee, and these numbers are incorrect. So that's, yeah, I have a big problem with the benchmark section. So, but I don't know how everybody feels if you want to skip that section until there's correct numbers. I'm not really comfortable with a recommendation on a benchmark that's not accurate.
Yeah, the benchmark is based off of the Keenan benchmark survey that we conduct annually.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the information from each entity. So sometimes the entities just say nothing's changed. And if that's the case, it can become outdated. And so from that perspective, we can go back, we can revisit that and come back with you with the corrected benchmark information.
Right. It looks like you're referencing, because it hasn't been for the, what I would consider the relevant plans. There's 4 different plans in County of Los Angeles. 2 of them are management plans that are very small. And then there's 2 for the union groups. There's 1 for ours and then 1 for coalition. The represented members are all under a $10 copay. So I don't know where the 15 came from. This specific POS that you're referencing is inaccurate. I'm assuming these are also from the management tiers, which is a small portion of the overall population. The vast majority are in the other two. So
What I can tell you is we are in the process right now of updating our survey. We do it annually and it's at the beginning of the year. I will take that information to our survey committee, and whoever meets with the county look to correct it. Typically what we ask for is the most popular plan. And because we're not collecting enrollment data or anything like that, it's basically what those entities are then telling us is their most popular plan in each situation. So I apologize for the incorrect information that's here. We can correct it. I could make some, without addressing any of the slides in particular, there's a couple of comments that I'd make. One would want to make more in line with what the markets are, differences between Northern California and Southern California, because it tends to skew California as a state in whole. They're two, in my opinion, complete separate markets.
okay. Go ahead. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So today, the idea is to go through pharmacy, which I think we could do really quickly because we had some information from Lisa and Dr. Patel earlier that went through some of that information. And then we'll also look at those benchmarks. So on the pharmacy side, when we refer to pharmacy benefit managers or PBMs, those are the entities that administer and manage the prescription drug benefits under the plans. So under the fully insured plans that you have today, the PBM is embedded with a medical carrier. But as we look at the potential for self-funding in the future, you can separate out a PBM. So that can be a standalone carved out from your medical benefit, and you can have a medical carrier and a PBM. So some of the terminology of formulary, I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar with this, but that's the listing of drugs that's covered under a health plan. So all the carriers have the ability to create their own formulary. Most of them have multiple formularies. The more restrictive, the less expensive it's going to be. So that's one of the things that we look at as we go through the RFP is what is the disruption look like in terms of the formulary that's offered today. The carriers do update those at least annually, sometimes multiple times throughout the year. And in terms of the disruption, we have requested, we show in the RFP where the drugs fall in the current tiers. So whether they're generic, brand, non-formulary, and we ask the carriers to come back and say, for the drugs that you're using, these are the categories that they would fall into under our formularies. So one of the things we did ask for is that we would grandfather the drugs that require pre-authorization so that the members would not have to jump through hoops to continue on that drug if they've gone through that pre-authorization process under the current plans. And these are the pharmacy tiers. So I think you're probably familiar with this, but the generic is the chemical copy of the brand name drug. And so it has the same active ingredients and the same benefits, but it's offered at a lower cost. It's the least expensive tier. Brand is the first version of that medication that's come to the market. So that's more expensive. And that's when it's in that patent stage that we talked about earlier. So no one else can come up with a drug as long as the patent is in place. Some of those are longer than others. Like you said, like 7 to 10 years, it could be in place before the generics can come to market. There's also brand non-formulary. So they're brand name drugs where there's no generic equivalent and they are not on the formulary. However, employees can still, or members can still get those brand name non-formulary drugs. They're going to pay a higher copay, and there's a higher cost associated with that. And then the specialties, you know, we did talk about that earlier too. They are meant for just a smaller group of people that are taking these to treat complex conditions. So it could be like rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, multiple sclerosis. These are very high cost drugs and mostly are all injectable. The next slide. Traditionally, we saw this was just a little bit different under the Anthem information presented today, but traditionally, the drug spend outside of specialty has been about 96% of utilization. So you've got about 4% of your membership that's using a specialty drug, and that's driving about 65% of the cost. So these are averages. This is not just specific to City of LA. And then under these specialty drugs, it varies, but the average is about $25,000 a year per script. So extremely expensive drugs are hitting the plan. I think we talked about GLP-1s quite a bit, but just one of the things that we were talking about earlier is that we are going to see more and more of GLP-1 utilization because they're expanding the indications. And he talked about sleep apnea and NASH. We're also seeing some of the other indications that the GLP-1s could be used for, could be kidney disease, Alzheimer's. So as we see more and more of these come to market, we're going to have more and more GLP-1 utilization. Another thing that Dr. Patel talked about earlier was the biosimilars. And these are almost identical copies of the original drugs. So they are priced more moderately than the specialty drugs. They're not generics, but it's kind of a way of looking at a generic versus brand, and that it's, got the same utilization and the same impact, but for much less cost. So Humira is one of the biggies, and that's used to treat rheumatoid arthritis. And Humira is about $30,000 a year per script. There is a biosimilar that's come to market recently, and that's about $10,500 a year. So this is where we're going to see the market move towards. And there's going to be much more indication. Like we're going to be talking about biosimilars like we're talking about GLP-1s right now. This is the next generation. And then lastly, on the pharmacy, just to be aware of gene therapy drugs. So sometimes these fall under the medical side, and they're experimental treatment that adds the new gene or replaces and repairs a mutated gene into the body. And so this is to prevent certain diseases like hemophilia and cancer. They're multi-million-dollar drugs. So the latest gene therapy that came out was $4.25 million per script, but they're also curative. So if somebody goes onto one of these drugs, it cures that disease. So it could be less expensive than a lifetime of being on another drug. High level pharmacy 101.
Sean, I want to be respectful on the benchmarking. So I'm going to leave it to, the slides are here for you. We've heard comment relative to the concerns of accuracy, which concerns me too. So I'll be heading back to see what happened there. But some of the comments in general that I want to make, because we do have Northern California, Southern California, and then statewide. Some of the differences that really drive plan selection and so forth is based off of the availability of healthcare. If you look at Northern California, the top 3 healthcare systems make up about 80% of the market. So you have very limited choices in what healthcare system you go to. I'm sorry, yeah, 80% of the market. In Southern California, the top 3 healthcare systems make up about 30%. So there's a lot more healthcare systems, a greater variety. And so in that situation, HMOs work in greater abundance. The population is more dense in Southern California than it is in Northern California. In Northern California, if you're outside of the Bay Area or Sacramento, the HMOs are pretty much non-existent and so forth. So PPOs become, and EPO type of products become more relevant. And even with CalPERS, the EPOs are available in Northern California because people are demanding in certain populations HMO type coverage, but they can't do that necessarily. One of the biggest differences between HMO and an EPO is predominantly due to capitation. And this excludes the Kaiser model, which is a different model. It's a staff model. But in general, the HMO models include some sort of a capitated fee towards facilities and providers, meaning when you sign up for an HMO, you sign up for 1, a primary care physician, and 2, for a facility where you'll receive your services. In exchange for that, those HMO facilities, those HMO providers receive a monthly payment from the insurance carrier. And they receive that payment and agree to provide certain services at a reduced or at no cost. In other words, a claim is not developed for certain services. Other services are still claim-based, but certain aren't. That availability adds a component to cost. And as long as the capitation fees are manageable here in Southern California, the introduction of EPOs is going to be somewhat limited. And aside of that, I really want to check this. Just the data, I just don't want to spend a lot of time unless there's particular interests that you have that you want me to address. Plus, we've had a long meeting.
AJ, does anybody have any questions on the? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you already do this one? I wasn't sure what I missed. Okay. Last item, number 10, committee report 2507 on the LAWell plan change and procurement update.
We can take this one really quickly. It is really an update that we're going to bring more updates. So the proposal is these 2 attachments here will be standing reports that are going to be brought forward to the committee to describe how we're doing and with these particular items and what their status is, so that everybody can keep track of the history, the progress of these items, and we can be better at transparently on consistently communicating them. Attachment A, there's really nothing to talk about attachment A yet, but as we bring that forth for the LAWell plan changes, it's really going to be relying on the RFP progress. There'll be more substance towards that information. Attachment B does have, though, an update, and we're going to have Karina give that real quick.
Good morning. So the LAWell program manages contracts with various providers to deliver related services. As outlined on the pages 1 and 2 of the report, you can see the current services and their status along listed by the remaining contract authority time. As mentioned previously, the medical RFP, the proposals for this are due by March 4th. For the consulting RFP, some quick background. In November of 2019, the JLMBC approved the RFP for plan administration and communications consulting services. In August of 2020, the JLMBC recommended selecting Siegel and Keenan for the consulting services. And on August of 2023, the JLMBC recommended a 2-year contract extension. Currently, the RFP is being drafted, but a proposed timeline can be seen on page 3 of this report. One thing to note is that the communications and consulting RFP will be separate, but bidders will still have the ability to bid on both services, so the timelines for both will need to coincide with one another. We aim to bring forth the draft to this for approval at our May 1st meeting. As for our third-party administrator RFP, again, on June 1st, 2023, the JLMBC approved an extension of our third-party administrative record-keeping services with TELUS. The planning stage for this RFP has begun, with staff gathering components to develop the scope of services, including system improvements and changes. A timeline for this process is also being planned. Given that the prior transition took 18 months, the final RFP selection and award should occur no later than 2027, with services beginning March 2029. The next steps include completing the planning process, drafting the timeline, and beginning the RFP. As for the disability RFP, as mentioned earlier, it was recommended to extend the current contract with the standard. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That is it. Do we have any request for future agenda items?
No, but can I make a comment? I really want to thank the department for all of the work that you've done with the fire disaster communications and the extra contract for was it the company that was reviewing documents. I mean, all of the way you've reworded things that we all know about to really kind of dig into this is how these things can help you if you're going through a disaster right now. It was just really top notch, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Well said. Okay, so our next regular meeting is March 6th and adjourned 11:03, not too late. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Yeah.